Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Purdy Insurance. Visit Purdy Insurance on Market Street in Sunbury or visit online at purdyinsurance.com.
And joining us now from the Steelers Radio Network and also the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, my good friend Gerry Dulac. Great to have you with us, sir.
Well, Steve, a couple things. First of all, no call today is better than any Steve Jones call. Second of all, I haven't been in Amherst since way back when my friend John Calipari was there, and I went up to do a piece on him and spent a couple days in Amherst. But beyond all that, always good to be with you, as you know, my friend.
Always great to have you. Yes, I haven't been here since 1991.
That was, when was Calipari there? Back in the 80s, right? Probably.
Yeah, 80s, early 90s. So Cal was the coach here, and Penn State was in its last year in the Atlantic 10. It's the last time I've been up here.
How about that?
Well, 16-16 yesterday with Detroit. Let's start with this. There were some players, including Najee Harris, who, by the way, have probably never been involved in a game where, there wasn't an overtime that gave you a winner, that didn't know you could end in a tie.
Right.
What we call the Donovan McNabb syndrome. Does that play a role in the attitude about how some guys may have played this thing?
That's a good question. First of all, there's probably very few guys who realize that. I mean, they would be rookies, and for the most part, with the exception of Najee Harris, they probably wouldn't have much of a role in the outcome. But knowing Najee Harris and the way he plays, I don't think that would be an issue at all. With him, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's fair answer, very fair. T.J. Watt, he had to sit out a chunk of it after he made that play. Any idea on what his availability is moving forward?
Well, let me also say, too, Steve, as an alum, I am more dismayed what I'm seeing with these close losses and fourth-quarter leads that aren't protected than I am by anything I saw yesterday, that's for sure.
Right.
And I'm, of course, referring to what you see up there. I was told TJ, he doesn't need surgery. It's nothing like that. It's nothing serious. Don't know for certain whether it's going to keep him out this week. I think it might, but the injury at least is nothing serious. It's going to keep him out for an extended period of time. Excuse me. And that is the good news. Mike Tomlin's news conference will be tomorrow. He sometimes updates us with injuries, even though sometimes he says he's going to update us. He really doesn't, but we'll see. But that's what I know right now, that at least it's not serious enough that he needs surgery.
So as you watched it yesterday, what were a couple of notes that you made on why it played out the way it did?
Well, probably the first thing that jumped out, Steve, was, for the second time in the last 3 games, I'm losing track with the Seattle game, the tackling is just really poor, and they're just gouged repeatedly with the run. Go back to Seattle, ran for 126 yards in the second half, and in that game, blown 14-point lead, went to overtime. Yesterday, the Detroit Lions, who've never run for more than 134 yards in a game this year, and had only rushed for over 200 yards twice in the last 8 years, had 199 yards rushing with 12 minutes to go in the third quarter. So that, to me, is what jumps out for any number of reasons. Whether, I don't buy the excuses that, that the Lions came out, using an extra tight end or 6 offensive linemen. Well, that's fine. Then adjust. Because they continued to do it. Jared Goff was playing with some bad ribs. He did throw it 24 times. But, obviously the fact that they were able to run meant that they were going to continue to try and run. And the Steelers, they finally, in the last half of the fourth quarter, Steve, I think the last 11 carries netted 8 yards. But, by then, it's a little too late. what's the expression? The hay's out of the barn, or the horse is out of the barn, whatever the case may be. And so the fact that they waited that long to be able to stop it did them no good. That was the first thing. The second thing that that really jumped out at me, and hey, look, high snaps, 2 fumbles lost in overtime. Poor Pat Freiermuth drops a pass and 8 plays later fumbles when they could have tried the field goal there. And you know better than I, ball security is not an issue with Pat Freiermuth. So a lot of strange things happen. But one of the other things, kind of subtly, I noticed is that the receivers just weren't getting open. They weren't gaining any separation. So many of Mason Rudolph's throws were contested or tried to be forced into tight windows. And I'm not sitting here defending the guy. He was okay. I'm not going to sit here and say he was terrible. I'm not going to sit here and say he was great. You got to consider the circumstances, too, under which he was playing. But what that tells me, the Lions had 9 passes defense. That's the most against the Steelers this year. And you're talking about a secondary that ranked last in the league in yards allowed per attempt. So it's not like they're exactly blanketing people and smothering people throughout the year. And yet they were covering those Steeler receivers like they were wearing their jerseys. And so when you see 9 passes defense, that tells me one of two things. Mason Rudolph either wasn't giving them enough time to get open, and I don't think that was the case, but I'll give that as a possibility, or they just weren't gaining any separation and getting open. And to me, that's what stood out, and that's what hurt their passing game. He threw 50 times. He completed 30. Okay, 60% isn't abysmal. But, the longest completion other than that last play to Deontay Johnson, well, not the last one, but the one in overtime, the 36-yarder where he fumbled, their longest completion was 17 yards. And, okay, I know they're playing without Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster's done for the season. But that's what stood out to me, their failure to take advantage of a secondary that, statistically is one of the worst in the league in terms of giving up longer passes or lots of yards. And they did nothing with it. And the receivers, like I said, they just weren't getting open.
I always feel like when I'm watching games that the team that loses, they'll make losing plays. I felt Detroit made a long list of losing plays yesterday and didn't lose.
Yeah, and that's what was amazing, Steve. I agree with you. Right down to missing the field goal in overtime. Missing the extra point earlier. Jared Goff passed for 61 yards through 4 quarters of regulation, and I think that's the lowest the Steelers had allowed since Christmas Day 2017. So. In situations like that, you would expect a team to be able to win, but, when you're gouged in a running game like that, and, the Lions are trying to hand it to the Steelers. That's why they're 0-8, and the Steelers are just trying to hand it back to them, again, with everything. They had a touchdown, Najee Harris touchdown nullified by a penalty. They had the 4 high snaps. The 2 fumbles lost in overtime. They didn't deserve to win, that's for sure. They're lucky they got a tie out of it.
What's odd is I feel like now that tie is going to play a big role in how the final standings turn out, because that half game, I always feel like every time I see one of these, that I just feel like in the end it plays a gigantic role in what we see.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it always seems to. And you get half a win and half a loss. But when you start looking at the rest of the conference and tiebreakers, that half a loss, rarely does it seem that the half a victory helps. It's more like the half a loss hurts you more than the half a victory helps you, without question.
Absolutely. So they got the Chargers coming in on Sunday night, and the Chargers started off great. Now, Gerry, this is an observation I made, and you can then run with it from there as to whether you agree with it or not. I feel like we're in an era right now where we have there are really good teams, but there are no great teams. Is that fair?
I referenced this today, and I've always remembered this, Steve. Sam Weiss, the old Bengals coach, told me this years ago. he said typically in the National Football League there's 4 really good teams and 4 really bad teams, and the other 24 are trying to figure out if they want to be 10-6 or 6-10. Now I know it's 17 games now, but typically he's right. Now this year, not so much. And what's happening is the past 2 weeks have changed the perception of what people think about who's good and who isn't good, because we saw the Ravens get manhandled by the Dolphins, if you will, Thursday night. We saw the Steelers lose to the Lions. You see the Browns, who 1 week after coming back with an impressive win, allow 45 points to New England. You see Arizona getting beat again. And I know Kyler Murray's not playing, but still. And the week before, all the upsets. The last 2 weeks have changed the entire perception of the league as to who's good and who isn't good. And, the old on any given Sunday in the NFL, while that's certainly been applicable and believable the last 2 weeks from what we've seen. So, to your point, I tend to agree with you. I still think, and I've thought this for the last couple of weeks, I think Tennessee is the best team in the AFC and maybe the NFL. And when you look at the lineup of people that they've beaten, the Chiefs, the Bills, Kansas City, I said Kansas City, now New Orleans, and I'm missing somebody in between there. They've won, I think, 5 games in a row now, and if not 6. And they've all been winning teams that they've beaten. And so I think you can make the argument that they're the best team in the NFL. Okay, Arizona had the record, and so they've lost 2 now because of Kyler Murray not being there. The Rams have been exposed a couple times. I think they're a little overrated, but I think they're good. We've seen Tampa Bay, lose in New Orleans and then lose in Washington. Is there a dominant team? No. But I think right now you can make the case that Tennessee is the best team in the NFL.
So what does it take under the rules for Ben Roethlisberger to be cleared and play? Is it the same? Is he in the same category Aaron Rodgers? No, I mean, he's not in the same category as Aaron Rodgers, but I mean, what's the protocol to get him back?
Well, he gets tested tomorrow, Steve, and if he gets 2 because he's fully vaccinated, and he has told me that he is, which he has said that in the past anyhow. He, 2 negative tests, and he can return. And he is hopeful he can return this week, and he will participate in their meetings virtually this week with the hopes that he will get 2 negative tests in a row and then can return. If he does not get 2 negative tests in a row, then he is not eligible to return till next Tuesday, which would be obviously after the Chargers game and before the game against the Bengals. So he did test positive. He is vaccinated. That's where it stands. And, obviously he's hopeful that, those back-to-back negative tests come about. He's feeling better. He apparently on Saturday he woke up. He wasn't feeling great Friday, but woke up Saturday, had some of the symptoms, went to the facility for the walkthrough practice, but when he got there, took a COVID test and stayed away from people, and it came back later in the day positive. So that's kind of how that all transpired. But, again, he got his fingers crossed that he gets those back-to-back tests. And if he does, he could come back this week, I think, in 5 days. So if he tested Saturday, he could conceivably, I believe, be at Thursday's practice, but Friday for sure.
Okay. Gerry, always a pleasure, my friend. Appreciate it very, very much.
Well, Steve, enjoy Amherst, and I'm hoping one of these last 2 games, maybe Michigan State or something, we could see something positive, because it's getting frustrating watching these other games slip away.
Yeah, man, I know. The other part, too, is I've been able to cover over the years the U.S. Open, so I'm in the USGA pool. Right. I'm planning on going up to the country club when I come up here. I'm at least put in for it, so then you and I can maybe do some work there.
Absolutely. And, the first U.S. Open I covered out of town, beyond going to Oakmont, but back when I first started traveling, covering the tour, it was at the country club in Brookline when Curtis Strange was. That was the first one I did when I began in the business covering golf and writing golf and traveling.
That is really cool. Well, I'm just thought I'd throw that nugget out there.
There you go. Well, I always tell the golf guys during the week when I need my little mental respite from the Steelers, I call some of the golf people and chat golf with them, just to get a little mental therapy.
And you know what? I think that works wonders.
Yeah. Steve, I hear tell that there's a nice club called Bel Air Country Club in Los Angeles Sunday that might have my name on the list Sunday morning before that Chargers game.
Oh.
Now that's a rumor. That's a rumor that I hear, but feel free to check it out if you'd like.
I will check out that rumor. Oh, that's tempting. Oh, thank you so much. And now you've dangled that. Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks, Gerry.
Well, I'm coming to town Thursday to pick up my daughter. I'll think of you as I'm breezing through.
Thank you, sir. It's always great to have you, my friend.
All right, man. Always good talking with you, Steve.